while shopping, a little girl climbed into the lonely millionaire's cart and said, "Take me home, Daddy." Would you walk away if a child claimed you were their parent? Or would you stop and listen? Drop a comment below. In a world where connection is a luxury and love often feels out of reach, what happens when a forgotten child crosses paths with a man who gave up on happiness? It's easy to walk past someone at the store and never know the storm they're fighting. But what if that storm is a 3-foot-tall little girl with big brown eyes, tangled curls, and a voice that shatters silence with 4 haunting words? "Take me home, Daddy." What kind of pain makes a child say that to a stranger? What kind of past makes a man hesitate before calling security, only to look down at her and see his own pain reflected back? In today's story, we follow Braylon Madsen, a reclusive millionaire who lives alone in a penthouse overlooking the city, and Tahlia Rose, a caramel-skinned 5-year-old girl who climbed into his grocery cart on a quiet Thursday afternoon. What begins as a strange incident soon unfolds into a life-altering mystery involving a troubled past, secret identities, a powerful family feud, and an unforgettable love story with Serenity Vale. Let's get into the story. Rain pattered against the grocery store's glass doors, a steady rhythm that matched Braylon Madsen's measured steps. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing the aisles in a sterile glow. At 38, Braylon moved with the precision of a man who'd learned to control every facet of his life. His sharp jawline and storm-gray eyes caught fleeting glances from other shoppers, but he didn't notice. He never did. Dressed in a tailored black coat, he pushed his cart through the store, its wheels squeaking faintly. To the world, he was a millionaire who owned half the city's skyline, living in a penthouse that overlooked Chicago's restless pulse. To himself, he was a man who'd stopped feeling years ago. He paused at the deli counter, scanning the glass case with detached efficiency. Prosciutto, Gruyere, the usual. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a work email, no doubt, but he ignored it. The store was quiet for a Thursday evening, the kind of quiet that made you hear your own thoughts too clearly. He didn't like that. As he turned to place his order, a soft rustle came from his cart. He glanced down. There, nestled between his groceries, sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5, her caramel skin glowing under the harsh lights, her big brown eyes wide and unblinking. Tangled curls spilled over her shoulders, and her faded pink dress was a size too small. She clutched a tattered stuffed rabbit, its ear half torn. Braylon froze, his hand still on the cart's handle. "Hey," he said, voice low but firm. "What are you doing in there?" The girl tilted her head, studying him like she'd known him forever. Then, with a voice so soft it barely carried, she said, "Take me home, Daddy." The words hit like a punch. Braylon's grip tightened on the cart. He glanced around, expecting a parent to rush forward, apologetic and flustered. The aisle was empty. Just him, the girl, and the hum of the refrigerators. "I'm not your dad," he said, softer now, crouching to her level. "Where's your mom? Your family?" Her eyes didn't waver. "You're my daddy. I waited. You came." His chest tightened, the sincerity in her voice, the way her tiny hands gripped that rabbit. It stirred something he'd buried long ago. He straightened, scanning the store again. No one. Not a single person looking for a lost child. He waved over a store clerk, a lanky kid with a name tag that read Josh. "There's a kid in my cart," Braylon said, keeping his voice even. "She's not mine. Can you page her parents?" Josh blinked, peering into the cart. Yeah, sure. Hey, little girl, what's your name?" "Tahlia Rose," she said, her gaze still locked on Braylon. She reached out and tugged his coat sleeve. "Don't leave me again." The words clawed at him. Again. What did she mean? Braylon's mind raced. He wasn't good with kids, or people for that matter. His life was contracts, boardrooms, and silence. Yet here was this girl looking at him like he was her entire world. Josh grabbed the intercom. "Attention, shoppers. We have a lost child, Talia Rose, at the deli counter. Please come to the front." Minutes passed. No one came. Talia Rose stayed quiet, her eyes never leaving Braylon. He shifted uncomfortably, the weight of her stare pressing into him. He should call security, get her to someone who could handle this. But when he reached for his phone, she whimpered, a sound so raw it stopped him cold. "Please," she whispered. "I don't want to go back." "Back where?" Braylon asked, kneeling again. "Who are you running from?" She hugged her rabbit tighter, her lips trembling. "The loud house. They yell. They don't want me." His jaw clenched. He knew better than to get involved. He'd spent years building walls around his heart, ever since the accident that took everything from him. But those eyes, God, those eyes. They were his own, a decade ago, staring into a void of loss. "Sir?" Josh was back, now with a security guard, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense frown. "We need to take her to the office." Protocol Talia Rose's face crumpled. She scrambled out of the cart and latched onto Braylon's leg, her screams piercing the air. "No, don't leave me! Daddy, please!" The guard reached for her, but Braylon held up a hand. "Wait," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. He looked down at Talia Rose, her sobs shaking her small frame. Something in him cracked. "I'll stay with her," he said, the words surprising even himself. "Just give us a minute." The guard hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, then we need to call the police." Braylon knelt, gently prying Talia Rose's hands from his leg. "Hey, look at me," he said. "I'm not going anywhere right now, okay? But you gotta tell me something. Why do you think I'm your dad?" Her lip quivered, but she met his gaze. "Mommy said you'd find me. She said you have a scar." Her tiny finger pointed to his left hand where a faint white line ran across his knuckles, a remnant of a night he'd never forget. Braylon's breath caught. No one knew about that scar. Not his colleagues, not his acquaintances. Only one person ever had. But that was impossible. She was gone. Dead. Wasn't she? "Sir," the guard interrupted. "Time's up." Braylon stood, his mind a storm of questions. Who was this girl? Who was her mother? And why did her words feel like a key to a door he'd locked years ago? "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. "Let's go to the office, but I'm coming with her." Talia Rose clung to his hand, her grip fierce for someone so small. As they followed the guard, Braylon's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, a text from an unknown number. "She's not safe. Keep her close." His blood ran cold. He tightened his hold on Talia Rose's hand, the grocery store suddenly feeling like a maze with no exit. "If you've made it this far, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I truly hope you're enjoying the story. It means so much to have you here, sharing this moment with me. Please take a second to tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our story family reaches. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so we can keep sharing these powerful stories together." Now, let's continue with the story. Braylon's penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, perched high above Chicago's glittering chaos. The city lights sprawled below, indifferent to the storm brewing in his chest. Talia Rose, Rory as she'd started calling herself, sat on his leather couch, her small legs dangling, clutching that tattered rabbit. Her big brown eyes followed him as he paced, the text from the unknown number burning in his mind. "She's not safe. Keep her close." He'd brought her here against every instinct, driven by guilt, curiosity, and something deeper, something he couldn't name. The police had taken her statement at the store, but with no missing child report matching her description, they'd released her to social services. Braylon had intervened, promising to keep her safe for the night. A temporary fix. A dangerous one. "Who sent that text?" he muttered, more to himself than her. Rory didn't answer, just hummed softly, tracing patterns on the couch with her finger. He stopped pacing and crouched in front of her. "Rory, you said your mom told you about me. What else did she say?" Her gaze met his, unnervingly steady. "She said you're sad, like me. But you'd keep me safe." His throat tightened. "I don't even know you." "You know me," she whispered, her voice carrying a weight no child should bear. "You just forgot." The words stung, stirring memories he'd buried, a daughter's laughter, a life stolen by a bitter custody war. He stood abruptly, turning to the window to hide the crack in his composure. "You're staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we find your family." Rory's hum faltered, but she nodded, her trust in him both a gift and a burden. As he prepared a guest room, his phone buzzed again. Another text. "Check her bag." He glanced at Rory's tiny backpack, slung over the couch. Against his better judgment, he unzipped it. Inside, among crayons and a crumpled juice box, was a folded note. In neat, hurried script. "Braylon, she's yours. Don't let them take her." His pulse spiked. Who knew his name? Who knew her? Across the city, Serenity Vale sat in a dimly lit precinct, her caramel eyes rimmed with exhaustion. At 32, she carried the weight of 3 years without her daughter. Her warm, honey-toned skin glowed faintly under the fluorescent glare, but her hands trembled as she faced Detective Harper, a grizzled man with a tired sigh. "Miss Vale," Harper said, leaning back in his chair, "we've been over this. No new leads, no sightings. You need to—" "Stop," Serenity snapped, her voice sharp but fraying. "She's out there. I feel it. You don't get to give up on her." Harper's jaw tightened. "We haven't given up, but after 3 years with no evidence—" "No evidence." Her laugh was bitter. "You stopped looking after 6 months, told me she was probably gone. She's not gone. She's my Rory." The detective's silence was deafening. Serenity's fingers curled around a photo in her lap, Rory at 2, all curls and giggles, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She'd been taken from Serenity's car during a quick stop at a gas station. No witnesses, no ransom. Just a void where her daughter used to be. The authorities had called it a dead end. Serenity called it betrayal. "I'm hiring a private investigator," she said, standing. "I'll find her myself." Harper's eyes softened, but he didn't stop her. "Be careful, Miss Vale. Stirring this up could bring trouble." "Trouble?" She paused at the door, her voice low. "I lost my daughter. Trouble's already here." Back at the penthouse, Braylon couldn't sleep. Rory's note lay on his kitchen counter, its words seared into his mind. "She's yours." Impossible. He had no children, not anymore. His daughter, Ellie, had been ripped from him a decade ago after a brutal custody battle with his ex-wife, Mara. Mara had vanished with Ellie, cutting all contact. He'd searched for years, poured millions into private investigators, but they'd found nothing. Ellie would be 13 now. Rory was 5. The math didn't add up, yet Rory's gestures, her habit of drawing tiny stars on her palm, the way she whispered a bedtime prayer, echoed Ellie in ways that made his skin prickle. He sat beside her as she slept, her small form curled under a blanket. She looked so fragile, yet her presence filled the room. He reached for her backpack again, pulling out a small object he'd missed earlier. A bracelet, silver and worn, engraved with, "To Rory, love, Mommy." His breath caught. The engraving style, the delicate script, it was identical to a locket he'd given Mara years ago. A coincidence or something more? "Rory," he whispered, though she didn't stir. "Who are you?" Flashbacks clawed at him. Ellie's 5th birthday, her tiny hands smearing cake on his face. The courtroom, Mara's cold stare as she won full custody. The night he'd punched a wall, leaving the scar Rory had noticed. He'd lost everything. His daughter, his hope, his heart. Now this child, with her haunting familiarity, was dragging it all back. His phone buzzed, shattering the silence. Another text. They're watching. Don't trust the police. His grip tightened. Who was they? Why target him? He glanced at Rory, her chest rising and falling softly. For the first time in years, he felt something beyond numbness. Fear, yes, but also purpose. He wouldn't let her go. Not yet. Morning came, gray and heavy. Braylon made Rory pancakes, her quiet delight softening the tension in his chest. You like stars, she said suddenly, pointing to her drawings on a napkin. Like me. He froze. How do you know that? Mommy told me. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes held secrets. She said you draw them when you're sad. He hadn't drawn stars since Ellie. The memory hit hard, nights spent sketching constellations with her, promising to take her to see the real ones. He pushed the plate away, his appetite gone. Rory, what's your mom's name? She hesitated, then whispered, Serenity. The name meant nothing to him, yet it felt like a key to a locked door. He needed answers, but every question led to more questions. Who was Serenity? Why did Rory know his past? And who was behind those texts? Across town, Serenity met with a private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Lila. I don't care what it costs, Serenity said, sliding Rory's photo across the table. Find her. Lila studied the photo, her expression unreadable. 3 years is a long time. You sure She's alive, Serenity cut in, her voice fierce. I'd know if she wasn't. Lila nodded, jotting notes. Any enemies? Anyone who'd want to hurt you or her? Serenity's jaw tightened. Her father's family, the Madsons. They never accepted me. Or her. Lila's pen paused. Madsons? As in Braylon Madsen? Serenity's eyes narrowed. You know him? He's a name in this city. Lila's tone was careful. If his family's involved, this just got complicated. Serenity's heart raced. The Madsons had called her a gold digger, a nobody unfit for their son. She'd fled their threats, raising Rory alone. But if they'd found her daughter... Check Braylon, she said. He's the key. Back at the penthouse, Braylon's doorbell rang. He checked the security feed. A woman, early 30s, caramel-eyed, her face a mix of determination and desperation. He didn't know her, but the sight of her sent a jolt through him. Serenity Vale stood at his door, and she wasn't alone. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. Rory's bracelet, the texts, the Madsons. Every clue pointed to a truth he wasn't ready to face. He opened the door, and Serenity's eyes locked onto his. "Where's my daughter?" she demanded, her voice trembling with fury and fear. Braylon's world tilted. Rory stirred behind him, her small voice cutting through the tension. "Mommy?" The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with questions neither could answer. Who had taken Rory? Why was Braylon's past colliding with Serenity's present? And what did the Madsons know that they weren't telling? Serenity's voice trembled with a mother's rage and desperation as she stood in Braylon's penthouse doorway, her caramel eyes blazing. "Where's my daughter?" Behind her, the Chicago skyline loomed, indifferent to the collision of their worlds. Braylon's heart pounded, Rory's small voice echoing in his mind. "Mommy?" The girl stood in the living room, clutching her rabbit, her wide eyes darting between them. Serenity pushed past Braylon, dropping to her knees to envelop Rory in a fierce embrace. "Oh, baby, I found you," she whispered, tears streaking her face. Braylon closed the door, his mind racing. Serenity's arrival, sparked by a neighbor's viral post about a cute girl and a rich man in Holmart, had shattered the fragile calm he'd built with Rory. He raised his hands, palms out. I didn't take her. She climbed into my cart, called me daddy before I said a word. Serenity stood, positioning herself between Rory and Braylon, her body a shield. You expect me to believe that? A millionaire just happens to find my daughter after 3 years. Her voice dripped with suspicion, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. She knew things, Braylon said, his voice low, steady. Things about my past no one could know. A scar. My daughter's habits. He gestured to his left hand, the faint white line Rory had pointed out. She had a note. Said she's mine. Serenity's jaw tightened. She's mine. Her name's Rory Vale, and I've been searching for her since she was taken from me. Her gaze flicked to Rory, softening, then hardened again. You're a Madsen. Your family wanted her gone. The accusation hit like a blade. Braylon's family, his mother, his cousins, had always been ruthless, guarding their wealth like a fortress. But he'd cut ties years ago after losing Ellie. I haven't spoken to them in a decade, he said. If they're involved, I'm as much in the dark as you. Serenity scoffed, but Rory tugged her hand. Mommy, he's nice. He made pancakes. The innocence in her voice cut through the tension, leaving a fragile silence. I'm calling the police, Serenity said, reaching for her phone. Braylon didn't stop her. Good. They'll want a DNA test. It's the only way to sort this out. The police arrived, their questions clinical, their presence a stark reminder of the stakes. Rory's story, wandering from a loud house she couldn't describe, offered no clear leads. With no immediate evidence of kidnapping, they ordered a DNA test, results due in 48 hours. Until then, Rory was to stay with Braylon under supervision, given Serenity's unstable housing and his resources. Serenity's fury was palpable, but she agreed, her eyes never leaving Rory. That night, Rory spiked a fever. Her small body shivered under Braylon's guest room blankets, her breaths shallow. Serenity sat by her side, brushing damp curls from her forehead, while Braylon called a private doctor. The diagnosis, a viral infection, manageable but requiring close care. The penthouse, once a sterile sanctuary, became a makeshift hospital. Serenity and Braylon were forced into an uneasy alliance, their shared worry for Rory a fragile bridge over their distrust. You don't have to stay in here, Serenity said, her voice tight as Braylon brought a glass of water. I've got her. I'm not leaving, he replied, setting the glass down. She's scared. You're scared. I'm not going anywhere. Serenity's eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. Hours passed, the two of them trading shifts, Serenity singing lullabies, Braylon reading Rory's favorite story from a worn book in her backpack. In the quiet moments, their guards began to crack. You act like you lost someone too, Serenity said one night, her voice softer, almost curious. They sat in the living room, Rory asleep between them. Braylon's gaze dropped to his hands, the scar a silent witness to his pain. I did. My daughter, Ellie, custody battle. I haven't seen her since she was 5. He paused, the words heavy. I never thought I'd get the chance to try again. Serenity's expression softened, her own grief mirroring his. Rory's my everything. When she was taken, I stopped living, just searching. He nodded, the shared weight of loss binding them. Why do you think my family's involved? She hesitated, then spoke. Your mother threatened me. Years ago, when I was pregnant, said a veil didn't belong in your world. I ran, raised Rory alone. Then she was gone. Braylon's fists clenched. His mother's cruelty didn't surprise him, but the timing did. If she took Rory, why send her to me? Serenity had no answer, but the question hung between them, a thread in a larger web. As Rory's fever broke, their conversations deepened. Serenity shared stories of Rory's first steps. Braylon admitted he still kept Ellie's old drawings. Laughter crept in, tentative but real, as they swapped tales of parenting's small joys. One night, as Rory slept soundly, Serenity touched Braylon's arm, her fingers lingering. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping her safe." He met her gaze, the warmth in her eyes stirring something he'd long suppressed. "I'm not sure I had a choice," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "She picked me." The moment held, charged with unspoken possibility, until Braylon's phone buzzed. A new text from the unknown number. "DNA won't tell you everything. Ask about the bracelet." His stomach dropped. He showed Serenity the message, her face paling as she reached for Rory's backpack, pulling out the silver bracelet engraved with, "To Rory. Love, Mommy." "This was mine," Serenity whispered, her voice shaking. "I gave it to her when she was born. How did you get it?" "Rory had it," Braylon said, his mind spinning. "Someone's playing a game. But who?" The next morning, the DNA results arrived. Braylon and Serenity sat across from each other, Rory coloring nearby, oblivious to the tension. The doctor's email was clear. Braylon was not Rory's father. Relief and disappointment warred in his chest, but Serenity's reaction was stranger. Her eyes widened, not with surprise, but with fear. "What's wrong?" Braylon asked. She swallowed hard. "If you're not her father, then who was I with all those years ago?" The question hung unanswered as Braylon's phone buzzed again. The Madsons know. Find Mara. His ex-wife's name sent a chill through him. Mara, who'd vanished with Ellie. Mara, who might hold the key to Rory's past, and Serenity's. The penthouse felt smaller, the walls closing in as the truth loomed just out of reach. Is it possible to love someone again after trauma? Have you ever felt that pull toward a person you barely knew? Share your thoughts. The DNA results hung in the air like a guillotine. Braylon stared at the email on his phone, the words blurring. No biological relation. Rory wasn't his daughter. The hope he'd barely dared to nurture, rekindled by her haunting familiarity, her star-drawing habit, the scar she'd known about, crumbled. Across the penthouse's sleek living room, Serenity's face crumpled, her caramel eyes glistening with a grief that mirrored his own. Rory, oblivious, colored stars on a napkin, humming softly. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the glass walls, a cruel contrast to the fracturing world within. Serenity's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. "If you're not her father, who was I with?" Her question, laced with dread, echoed Braylon's own spiraling thoughts. The anonymous text, the Madsons know. Find Mara, burned in his mind. His ex-wife, Mara, who'd vanished with their daughter Ellie a decade ago, was a ghost he'd stopped chasing. Until now. "I don't know," Braylon said, his voice hollow. "But we'll find out." He glanced at Rory, her small frame curled over her drawing. Saying goodbye to her felt like losing Ellie all over again, but the truth demanded it. He knelt beside her, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "Rory, sweetheart, you're going home with your mom soon, okay?" Rory's crayon stopped mid-stroke. Her big brown eyes met his, wide and shimmering. "You're my daddy," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't leave me." She flung herself into his arms, sobbing, her tiny hands clutching his shirt. The sound tore through him, raw and unrelenting, unraveling years of carefully built walls. Serenity watched, her own tears falling. "She loves you," she said, almost accusingly, but her tone softened. "Why does she love you?" Braylon held Rory tightly, his jaw clenched against the ache in his chest. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't walk away. Not yet." That night, as Rory slept in the guest room, Braylon and Serenity sat in tense silence, the bracelet engraved with "To Rory, Love, Mommy" on the coffee table between them. Serenity's fingers traced its edges, her voice barely audible. "I gave her this. I know I did. But nothing makes sense anymore." Braylon's phone buzzed, another anonymous text. "Check the mail." His pulse quickened. He retrieved a plain envelope from the penthouse's secure mailbox. No postmark, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in stark black. "She's not your daughter either." Serenity read it over his shoulder, her breath catching. "What does this mean?" Her voice rose, panic edging in. "She's mine. I carried her, raised her." Braylon grabbed her trembling hands, his own fear masked by resolve. "We're being played. Someone wants us to question everything. We need answers, not doubts." But the letter's words burrowed deep, sowing a seed of terror neither could shake. Serenity's memories of Rory's birth were vivid, her tiny cries, the hospital's sterile smell, yet the note's claim gnawed at her. Braylon, too, wrestled with the impossible. If Rory wasn't his, why did she feel like his? Why did she know his scars, his pain? Determined to act, Braylon leveraged his wealth, hiring a team of private investigators to trace the texts and the letter. He dug into his family's shadowy dealings, suspecting his mother's hand. The Madsons had a history of ruthlessness, and if they'd targeted Serenity and Rory, he'd expose them. Serenity, meanwhile, pored over old photos, searching for clues in Rory's past, her desperation a mirror to Braylon's own. A week later, a breakthrough came. One of Braylon's investigators, a former FBI agent named Carla, uncovered a lead. The texts originated from a burner phone linked to a defunct address in Chicago's South Side, a hub for illegal operations. "It's thin," Carla warned, her voice crackling over the phone, "but it points to a trafficking ring. Kids moved through there 3 years ago. Rory's age fits." Serenity's face paled, her hands gripping the kitchen counter. "Trafficking?" The word choked her. "My baby?" Braylon's mind flashed to a memory he'd suppressed, a case he'd funded a decade ago, a pro bono effort to dismantle a child trafficking network. His family had opposed it, calling it a waste of resources. Had they been involved? The thought sickened him. "We need to go there," Serenity said, her voice steely despite her fear. "Now." The South Side address was a crumbling warehouse, its windows boarded, the air thick with decay. Braylon, Serenity, and Carla navigated its shadowed halls, flashlights cutting through the dark. Graffiti marred the walls, and discarded toys, a doll, a broken truck, littered the floor, each a silent scream. Serenity's breath hitched as she clutched Rory's bracelet, her anchor to hope. In a back room, they found a filing cabinet, rusted but intact. Inside were records, coded but legible, names, ages, dates. Braylon's hands shook as he scanned them. A file labeled RV, 2 years, 2022, stopped him cold. The description matched Rory. Caramel skin, brown eyes taken from a gas station. A note in the margin read, "Placed with Foster. Madsen directive." "Madsen," Braylon growled, his voice barely human. "My mother." Serenity's eyes blazed. "They stole her. Your family stole my daughter." Carla intervened, her tone urgent. "There's more. The Fosters were a front. Kids were moved to elite families, sold like commodities. Rory was flagged for special placement. Someone wanted her with you, Braylon." The revelation hit like a tidal wave. Braylon's mother had orchestrated Rory's path to him, but why? To taunt him, to control him. And where was Mara in this? His ex-wife's name, tied to the texts, loomed like a specter. Back at the penthouse, Rory's health stabilized, but her drawings grew darker, stars now circled by jagged lines like cages. Serenity sat with her, singing softly, while Braylon met with Carla in private. "I need Mara found," he said, his voice low. "She's the key." Carla nodded. "We're close. Her last known location was a private estate in Wisconsin, owned by your cousin, Victor Madsen. He's been funneling money to the same network." Braylon's blood ran cold. Victor, ambitious and cruel, had always coveted the family empire. If he'd allied with Mara, they were playing a long game, one with Rory at its center. That night, Serenity found Braylon on the balcony, the city's pulse a distant hum. "You're not giving up," she said, not a question but a statement. Her hand brushed his, a quiet gesture of trust. "I can't," he said, meeting her gaze. "Not on her. Not on you." A tentative warmth bloomed between them, fragile but real. Serenity's strength, her fire, anchored him as much as Rory's trust did, but the truth was closing in, and it wasn't kind. The next morning, Carla delivered a bombshell. Mara was alive, living under an alias in Wisconsin. Photos showed her with Victor, their faces grim. A second file, buried in the warehouse records, revealed Rory's origin, not Serenity's daughter, not Braylon's, but a child born to a woman in the trafficking ring, her identity erased to serve the Madsens' schemes. Serenity's pregnancy had been a lie, a cover to place Rory with her, orchestrated by the Madsens to destabilize Braylon's life years later. Serenity collapsed, sobbing, as Braylon held her. "She's still mine," she choked out. "I raised her. I love her." "She's ours," Braylon said fiercely, the words slipping out unbidden. "We'll protect her." Rory, sensing the shift, crawled into their laps, her small arms encircling them both. "Don't leave," she whispered, and they didn't. But the final text arrived, chilling in its clarity. "You found the truth. Now, run." Braylon's mother, Victor, Mara. They were closing in, and Rory was their pawn. The penthouse was no longer safe, and the fight for Rory's future had just begun. The penthouse, once Braylon's sanctuary, felt like a trap. The final text, "You found the truth. Now run," pulsed in his mind as he and Serenity stood over Rory, who slept fitfully, her small hand clutching her rabbit. The revelation that Rory was neither his nor Serenity's biological daughter, but a child born into a trafficking ring and placed with Serenity under false pretenses, had shattered them both. Braylon's mother, Victor, and Mara were orchestrating a game with stakes higher than he'd imagined, and Rory was the pawn. Serenity's eyes, red-rimmed but fierce, met his. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "They're coming." Braylon nodded, his jaw tight. "I've got a safe house in Michigan. We leave tonight." But the weight of Mara's name, Mara, his ex-wife, tied to the texts and Victor's schemes, gnawed at him. What did she want? And why drag him into this now after a decade of silence? As they packed essentials, Braylon's investigator, Carla, called with a bombshell. "Mara's been running an illegal adoption agency," she said, her voice taut. "Fronted as a charity, but it's a cover for moving kids from the trafficking ring to wealthy families. Your family's money funded it, Braylon. Your mother and Victor were silent partners." Braylon's blood ran cold. He glanced at Serenity, who was zipping Rory's backpack, oblivious to the call. "And Rory?" he asked, lowering his voice. Rory was one of their placements. Serenity was fed a story about being her biological mother, but the agency fabricated everything, medical records, birth certificates. Serenity adopted her through their channels, thinking it was legitimate. Braylon ended the call, his mind reeling. Serenity had been a victim, manipulated into believing Rory was hers. He'd thought Rory was his, drawn in by her haunting familiarity, her star drawing, her prayers, echoes of his lost daughter, Ellie. But it was all a lie, engineered to pull him back into his family's web. He crossed the room, his voice low. "Serenity, We need to talk." She looked up, sensing the shift in his tone. "What now?" He hesitated, the truth a blade in his hand. "Rory, she's not your biological daughter. Mara's agency. They lied to you. You adopted her, but they faked the records." Serenity's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she gripped Rory's backpack. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I felt her kick. I held her when she was born." "They manipulated you," Braylon said, his voice gentle but firm. "The pregnancy, the hospital, it was a setup. They wanted you to raise her, to keep her hidden until they needed her." Serenity's knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch, tears streaming. "She's mine," she choked out. "I don't care what they say, she's mine." Braylon knelt beside her, his own heart fracturing. "You thought she was yours, so did I. But now what?" Serenity's eyes blazed through her tears, her voice fierce. "We protect her. Together." The word together hung between them, a fragile vow. Braylon nodded, the weight of it settling in his chest. "Then we move, now." They fled under cover of night, Braylon's black SUV cutting through Chicago's rain-slicked streets toward Michigan. Rory slept in the back seat, her soft breaths a reminder of what was at stake. Serenity sat beside Braylon, her silence heavy with grief and resolve. The safe house, a secluded cabin nestled in dense woods, was stocked and secure. But Braylon knew it was only a temporary shield. His family's reach was long, and Mara's motives were still a mystery. Days passed in tense vigilance. Braylon fortified the cabin's security, while Serenity kept Rory close, teaching her to draw constellations on the porch. Their shared care for Rory bridged their earlier distrust, but the truth about Mara's agency loomed. Braylon dug deeper, using his wealth to fund Carla's investigation. She uncovered records linking Mara to Victor's estate in Wisconsin, where children were processed before placement. One name stood out: Ellie, his daughter, listed as relocated years ago. The possibility that Ellie was alive, tangled in this same web, ignited a fire in him. Serenity noticed his distraction one evening as they watched Rory chase fireflies. "You're not just doing this for Rory," she said, her voice soft but probing. "Who's Ellie?" Braylon's throat tightened. "My daughter. Lost her in a custody battle. I thought she was gone forever, but she might be out there." He met Serenity's gaze, vulnerability raw in his eyes. "Rory feels like a second chance. I can't lose her too." Serenity's hand found his, a quiet anchor. "We won't," she said, and the warmth in her touch lingered, a spark in the gathering storm. But the storm broke sooner than they expected. On the fifth night, as moonlight filtered through the cabin's windows, the security system blared. Braylon checked the cameras, 3 men in black, armed, moving toward the cabin. His heart slammed against his ribs. "Serenity, get Rory. Back room, now." Serenity scooped Rory up, her face pale but focused. "Who are they?" "Victor's men," Braylon said, grabbing a gun from a hidden safe. "They're here for her." Rory whimpered, clutching her rabbit. "Don't let them take me, Daddy." The word "daddy" hit Braylon like a bullet, but there was no time for emotion. He barricaded the back room, handing Serenity a phone. "Call Carla. Tell her we need backup." He turned to the door, his voice low. "Stay here, no matter what." The men breached the cabin, their boots heavy on the wood floor. Braylon moved silently, using the shadows to his advantage. He took down the first man with a swift strike, disarming him, but the second was faster, landing a blow that sent Braylon crashing into a table. Pain flared, but he fought back, fueled by the thought of Rory's terrified face. Gunfire erupted, shattering the cabin's quiet. Braylon tackled the third man, wrestling for control of the weapon, when a scream pierced the chaos. Rory's. He spun, heart stopping. The back door was open, Serenity unconscious on the floor, a fourth man gone. Rory was taken. Braylon staggered to Serenity, shaking her awake. "They've got her," he rasped, blood trickling from a cut on his brow. "We have to move." Serenity's eyes snapped open, terror giving way to fury. "Where?" "Victor's estate," Braylon said, helping her up. "It's the only place they'd take her." Carla's team arrived too late, but they provided a lead. Victor's Wisconsin estate was a fortress, guarded and wired. Braylon and Serenity drove through the night, their shared fear for Rory forging a desperate alliance. The estate loomed in the dawn light, a sprawling mansion surrounded by iron gates. Braylon's wealth bought them intel, a weak point in the perimeter, but the risk was staggering. They infiltrated through a service entrance, moving like ghosts. The mansion's halls were cold, lined with portraits of Madsons who'd built their empire on secrets. Braylon's pulse thundered as they reached the basement, where muffled cries echoed. Rory. They found her in a locked room, curled in a corner, her rabbit gone. But Victor was there, flanked by 2 guards, and Mara. Her face, older but unmistakable, twisted with a mix of triumph and regret. "You shouldn't have come, Braylon," she said, her voice icy. "She's not yours." Serenity lunged, but Braylon held her back. "Why, Mara?" he demanded. "Why Rory?" "Why me?" Mara's smile was brittle. "Your mother wanted you broken. Victor wanted the Empire. I wanted Ellie back." Her voice cracked. "They took her from me, Braylon. The agency was my way to find her. Rory was a means to an end." Serenity's voice shook with rage. "She's a child, not a tool." A guard raised his gun, but Braylon acted first, tackling him as chaos erupted. Serenity grabbed Rory, shielding her, while Braylon fought off the second guard. Mara hesitated, her eyes on Braylon, then fled as Victor fired, the bullet grazing Braylon's shoulder. Pain seared, but he pushed forward, dragging Victor down. Serenity and Rory reached the stairs, but the ceiling groaned. Flames licked the walls, the mansion rigged to burn evidence. Braylon staggered after them, Victor unconscious at his feet. Smoke choked the air, the heat unbearable. They stumbled outside, collapsing in the grass as the mansion blazed behind them. Rory clung to them, sobbing. Serenity held her tight, then turned to Braylon, her face streaked with soot and tears. "I hated you for being a stranger," she said, her voice raw. "Now I hate the thought of losing you." Braylon's chest ached, not just from the wound. "I don't want to lose you either. Or her." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as Rory nestled between them. Carla's team arrived, securing the scene, but Mara was gone, vanished into the dawn. Victor's arrest exposed the trafficking ring, but questions lingered. Where was Ellie? What else did the Madsons hide? Braylon and Serenity, bound by love for Rory and each other, vowed to keep searching, their family forged not by blood, but by choice. The fire had taken the mansion, but the storm was far from over. The Wisconsin dawn broke in hues of gold and ash, the smoldering ruins of Victor's mansion, a stark reminder of the night's chaos. Braylon, Serenity, and Rory huddled in the grass, their breaths ragged, their bodies bruised, but alive. Rory's small arms wrapped around them both, her sobs quieting as she nestled into Serenity's chest. Braylon's shoulder throbbed from the bullet graze, but the pain was secondary to the relief flooding his veins. Rory was safe. The men who'd taken her, Victor's hired muscle, were in custody, and the trafficking ring's exposure was unraveling the Madsen empire. Mara's escape gnawed at him, a loose thread in a tapestry of lies, but for now Rory's safety was enough. Serenity's caramel eyes met his, her face streaked with soot and resolve. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of survival. "She's ours." Braylon nodded, his hand resting on Rory's curls. "Ours," he echoed, the word a vow. The fire had nearly taken everything, but it had forged something new, a family bound not by blood, but by choice. As Carla's team secured the scene, Braylon and Serenity loaded Rory into the SUV, her rabbit recovered from the wreckage, its singed ear a badge of their fight. They drove back to Chicago, the safe house in Michigan no longer needed. The penthouse, flawed and exposed, was still home. Days later, the penthouse felt different, warmer, lived in. Rory's drawings littered the coffee table, stars and stick-figure families in vibrant crayon. The media frenzy over the Madsen scandal raged outside, but Braylon shielded them, his wealth buying privacy and time. Serenity, once a stranger storming his doorstep, now moved through his space with quiet ease, her presence a balm to wounds he'd ignored for years. Rory's laughter, once a rare sound, filled the air as she chased a toy across the living room. That evening, after Rory fell asleep, her fever gone and her spirit bright, Braylon and Serenity stood on the balcony, the city's pulse a soft hum below. The tension that had defined them, distrust, accusations, fear, had burned away in the fire. What remained was raw, uncharted. Serenity leaned against the railing, her honey-toned skin glowing in the twilight, her eyes searching his. "We weren't meant to meet that way," Braylon said, his voice low, honest. "In a grocery store with her calling me daddy. But I'm glad we did." Serenity's lips curved, a soft smile that held no pretense. Maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was Rory choosing her family. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his, the touch electric, yet grounding. The air between them shifted, charged with a truth they'd both felt, but hadn't voiced. Braylon's fingers laced with hers, pulling her gently toward him. "I spent years running from feeling anything," he said, his voice rough with vulnerability. "Then she climbed into my cart, and you stormed into my life. I don't want to run anymore." Serenity's breath hitched, her eyes shimmering. "I was so angry at you, at the world for taking her. But you brought her back." She touched his face, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You brought me back." Their kiss was slow, deliberate, a release of fear and a claiming of now. No ghosts lingered. Mara's betrayal, Ellie's loss, the lies of the adoption agency faded in the warmth of their connection. Braylon led her inside, past Rory's closed door, to his bedroom. The city lights filtered through the windows, casting soft shadows as they undressed, not with urgency but with care, each touch a question answered. Their lovemaking was honest, unhurried, a dance of two people who'd faced death and chosen life. Serenity's sighs, Braylon's whispered promises, wove a new story, one of trust, of love rekindled not from the past but from the present. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. "We're a mess," Serenity murmured, a laugh in her voice. "A millionaire, a single mom, and a kid who picked us." "The best kind of mess," Braylon said, kissing her forehead. "We'll figure it out." For her, the next morning, Rory bounded into the kitchen, her energy infectious. "Pancakes," she demanded, climbing onto a stool. Braylon and Serenity exchanged a glance, their shared smile a silent pact. They cooked together, Rory's giggles filling the space as syrup dripped onto her chin. The normalcy felt sacred, a gift after weeks of terror. But the world outside wouldn't stay quiet. Carla's updates trickled in. Mara was still at large, her alias tied to a network spanning multiple states. The trafficking ring's collapse had freed dozens of children, but Ellie's fate remained a mystery, her name absent from recent records. Braylon's mother, implicated in the scandal, had fled the country, her assets frozen. Victor's trial loomed, promising more revelations. Each update was a reminder. Their fight wasn't over. Serenity, now living in the penthouse with Rory, took steps to formalize their family. She consulted lawyers, ensuring Rory's adoption was legally hers, free of the agency's taint. Braylon supported her, his resources a shield, but he also searched for Ellie, driven by a flicker of hope. Serenity understood, her own loss mirroring his. "We'll find her," she said one night, her hand squeezing his. "Or we'll make a home for Rory that's enough." Their bond deepened, rooted in shared purpose. They took Rory to the planetarium, her eyes wide at the starry dome, and to the park where she ran free, her laughter a melody. Braylon and Serenity stole moments, a kiss in the kitchen, a late-night talk on the couch, building a love that felt inevitable, yet hard-won. Rory, their anchor, thrived, her drawings now bright, her nightmares fading. One evening, as they tucked Rory into bed, she clutched their hands, her voice small but certain. "You're my mommy and daddy," she said, her brown eyes steady. "Forever?" "Forever," Serenity promised, her voice thick. Braylon nodded, his throat tight. "Forever, kiddo." Later, on the balcony, Serenity leaned into Braylon, the city sprawling below. "She chose us," she said, her voice soft. "And I'm choosing you." He pulled her close, the weight of her words settling deep. "I chose you the moment you stormed my door." The future was uncertain. Mara's shadow, Ellie's absence, the Madsons' lingering reach, but they faced it together, their love a fortress. Rory's presence had rewritten their story, a little girl who'd climbed into a cart and claimed them both. Have you ever felt like a child changed your life? Whether yours or not, some little souls just belong to us. Drop your stories in the comments. The Chicago skyline glittered under a late summer moon, its restless energy softened by the warmth spilling from Braylon's penthouse. Inside, the space had transformed over the past year, no longer a sterile fortress, but a home alive with color and chaos. Rory's crayon drawings adorned the fridge, a mix of stars, stick figure families, and lopsided hearts. Her laughter echoed from the living room, where she sprawled on the rug, building a pillow fort with Serenity. Braylon watched from the kitchen, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The memory of their first night together, after the fire that nearly took everything, lingered like a quiet melody. That night, tangled in honesty and love, had been the start of something unbreakable. Now, a year later, they were a family, not by blood, but by choice. Rory's voice cut through his thoughts. "Daddy, help!" she called, her brown eyes sparkling as she waved a cushion. At 6, she was a whirlwind of joy, her tangled curls bouncing, her faded pink dress replaced by a bright yellow one she'd picked herself. The nightmares of the loud house and the mansion fire had faded, replaced by trust in the two people who'd fought for her. Braylon crossed the room, dropping to his knees beside her. "What's the plan, kiddo?" he asked, ruffling her hair. "Bigger fort," Rory declared, shoving a pillow into his hands. Serenity laughed, her caramel eyes catching his, a silent language of love and gratitude passing between them. She wore a simple gold band on her left hand, matching the one on Braylon's, a vow made 3 months ago in a quiet ceremony by Lake Michigan, with Rory as their flower girl, tossing petals with gleeful abandon. "Mommy, you're not helping," Rory teased, tugging Serenity's sleeve. "Oh, I'm in trouble now," Serenity said, mock serious, pulling Rory into a tickle fight. The room filled with giggles, a sound that still felt like a miracle to Braylon. He joined in, the fort forgotten as they collapsed in a heap, Rory sandwiched between them, her small arms wrapping around their necks. "I love you, Mommy and Daddy," she said, her voice muffled but certain. "We love you too," Braylon and Serenity said in unison, their eyes meeting over Rory's head. The moment held the weight of their journey. From a grocery cart to a burning mansion, from strangers to spouses, from loss to this. The past year had been a reckoning. After Mara's escape and Victor's arrest, the Madsen family's empire unraveled. Braylon's mother, tracked to a villa in Spain, faced extradition, her role in the trafficking ring exposed. The scandal had shaken Chicago, but Braylon used his wealth to shield his new family, turning the penthouse into a sanctuary. Mara remained a ghost, her motives unclear, but Braylon's search for Ellie, his lost daughter, continued quietly, a flicker of hope he shared with Serenity late at night. Serenity had found her own purpose. The pain of learning Rory wasn't her biological child, a lie woven by Mara's illegal adoption agency, had nearly broken her. But love, not biology, defined her bond with Rory. She'd formalized Rory's adoption, ensuring no one could challenge their family. Beyond that, she'd launched the Veil Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to recovering missing children and supporting families torn apart by trafficking. Her work was relentless, fueled by the memory of 3 years without Rory, and Braylon backed her fully, his resources amplifying her impact. Braylon, too, had changed. The reclusive millionaire who once shopped alone, robotic and numb, was gone. Rory's arrival had cracked his walls. Serenity's love had dismantled them. He'd opened children's shelters across the city, funding safe havens for kids like Rory, kids who'd known too much pain. At the shelter's openings, he spoke publicly, his storm-gray eyes steady as he shared fragments of his story. Not the full truth, but enough to inspire. "Family isn't always who you're born to," he'd said at the latest ribbon-cutting, Serenity and Rory by his side. "It's who you'd fight to keep." Tonight, as Rory yawned and rubbed her eyes, Serenity scooped her up. "Bedtime, little architect," she said, kissing her forehead. Braylon followed, tucking Rory into her room, now painted with glow-in-the-dark stars. She clutched her rabbit, its singed ear a reminder of their survival. "Story?" Rory mumbled, already half asleep. Braylon sat on the bed's edge, Serenity leaning against him. "Once upon a time," he began, his voice soft, "a brave girl climbed into a cart and found her family." Rory smiled, her eyes fluttering shut. "That's me," she whispered. "That's you," Serenity said, her hand squeezing Braylon's. They lingered until Rory's breaths deepened, then slipped out, closing the door softly. In the living room, Braylon pulled Serenity close, her warmth grounding him. "We made it," he said, his voice low. "A year ago, I didn't think we'd get here." She tilted her head, studying him. "You were so closed off. I thought you'd push us away." "I tried," he admitted, a rueful smile tugging at his lips, "but you and Rory, you're impossible to resist." Serenity laughed, the sound bright and free. "Good thing, too." She kissed him, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that carried a year's worth of battles and triumphs. "I love you, Braylon Madsen." "I love you, Serenity Madsen," he replied, the name still a quiet thrill. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the city's hum a distant lullaby. The next morning they took Rory to the park, her favorite Saturday ritual. She ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, while Braylon and Serenity walked hand in hand. "She's growing so fast," Serenity said, her voice tinged with wistful pride. "Too fast," Braylon agreed, watching Rory twirl in the grass. "But we've got time." They did. Time to build, to heal, to love. The Veil Foundation was gaining traction, its first success stories, reunited families, rescued children, fueling Serenity's fire. Braylon's shelters were havens, each one a step toward redemption for the Madsen name. And Rory, their heart, thrived, her adoption finalized under Braylon's name, a legal bond to match the one in their souls. But shadows lingered. Carla's latest report, delivered over coffee that week, had been grim. Mara was rumored to be in South America, possibly rebuilding her network. Ellie's trail had gone cold again, though a new lead, A photo of a girl resembling her in a foster system offered hope. Braylon shared it all with Serenity, their partnership unshakable. "We'll keep looking," Serenity said now, squeezing his hand as they watched Rory. "For Ellie, for all of them." He nodded, his jaw tight. "And we'll keep Rory safe, no matter what." That night, they hosted a small gathering for the Foundation's volunteers, the penthouse alive with chatter and warmth. Rory, the unofficial mascot, charmed everyone, passing out cookies with a grin. Braylon and Serenity moved through the crowd, a team in every sense, their love a quiet strength. As the guests left, they stood on the balcony, Rory asleep inside, the city sprawling below. "We're doing okay, aren't we?" Serenity asked, leaning into him. "Better than okay," Braylon said, kissing her temple. "We're family." The word carried everything, the cart incident, the fire, the lies, the love. They'd fought for Rory, for each other, and they'd won. The future held challenges, Mara's shadow, Ellie's absence, but they faced it together, their bond a fortress. Hey, YouTube family, it's your storyteller here. Sometimes family isn't who you share blood with, but who you'd fight to keep. Braylon, Serenity, and Rory found each other in the chaos, proving love can rewrite even the darkest stories. What part of this story touched you the most? Drop a if you stayed until the end and share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and they fuel these tales. Subscribe for more stories that heal, twist, and remind us that love finds us when we least expect it. While you are at it, check out the video currently showing on your screen. Until next time, keep choosing family.